Hello students. During the next half an hour, we are going to be discussing Edgar Allan Poe's tale, The Fall of the House of Usher. As you probably know, Poe was an American poet, short story writer, and critic. His writings have influenced literature around the world. With his dark mystery tales, Poe is considered one of the early American practitioners of the short story. His works are generally classified as Gothic. They deal with themes such as death, premature burial, and the uncannily prolonged life of the dead. Poe is also hailed as a father of detective fiction. Auguste Dupin, who features in Poe's detective stories, is considered one of the early detectives in literary history, of course, along with Sherlock Holmes. Edgar Poe was born in 1809 in Boston to David and Elizabeth Poe. His parents were performing actors. When Poe was 2 years old, his mother died. His father had abandoned the family even earlier. So Poe, his brother, and his sister entered different foster families. Poe was taken into the family of John and Frances Allan. Poe was not legally adopted in the Allan household. He was subjected to the rigorous discipline of the Allan household. He felt uncomfortable there. When the Allan family moved to London in connection with John's business, Poe started his education in the English boarding schools. He was transferred from one school to another and from one master to another. When John's business failed, they moved to Richmond in Virginia. Poe started writing poetry at the early age of 11. In 1826, he entered the University of Virginia. There he studied ancient and modern languages. He incurred gambling debts, but John Allan, his foster father, refused to honor them. This soured the already strained relationship between Poe and his foster father. Poe left Richmond for Boston. In Boston, Poe's first poetry collection, Tamerlane and Other Poems, was published. Left without any financial support, Poe enlisted in the US Army. Soon he was promoted to the position of Sergeant Major. He wanted an appointment to the famous US Military Academy at West Point. For this, he got reconciled with John Allan. John Allan helped him get an appointment to West Point. Poe's second collection of verse, Al-Araf, Tamerlane and Minor Poems, was published in 1829. Poe disliked life at the academy and started disobeying orders. Soon he was expelled from West Point. He relocated to Baltimore and started living with his aunt Maria and his cousin Virginia Clem. In 1834, John Allan died, leaving Poe nothing in his will. While he was alive, he had almost abandoned Poe. At the age of 26, Poe secretly married his 13-year-old cousin Virginia Clem. His first collection of short stories, Tales of the Grotesque and Arabesque, came out in 1839. In 1844, he published a newspaper article entitled The Balloon Hoax. This duped New Yorkers into believing that the Atlantic had been crossed by a balloon. On account of this article, many critics consider Poe to be the inventor or reinventor of the genre we know today as science fiction. In 1845, the Evening Mirror published Poe's poem, The Raven. It became an instant sensation. After the death of his wife, Virginia, from consumption, Poe wrote a poem called Ulalume. Poe also wrote a cosmological treatise called Eureka. This is said to have anticipated the Big Bang Theory. Poe died on 7th October 1849. Poems such as Annabel Lee were published posthumously. After Poe's death, an associate by name Rufus Wilmot Griswold wrote a memoir about Poe. It presented Poe as a depraved, drunken man. This writer created the image of Poe as a tormented artist or a mad genius. Thanks to the French poet Charles Baudelaire's translations of Poe's works, including his theoretical works such as The Poetic Principle and The Philosophy of Composition, Poe became a celebrity even in Europe. As a literary critic, Poe was strongly against didacticism. To him, moral instruction through literature was heresy. Instead, he emphasized design and methodical writing intended to achieve maximum artistic effects. Poe's popular short stories include The Murders in the Rue Morgue, The Telltale Heart, The Gold Bug, The Purloined Letter, and The Cask of Amontillado. The Fall of the House of Usher is a macabre tale written by Poe. It is considered one of the classics of the American Gothic. It is also one of the finest examples of Poe's ideal in composition, unity of effect. Every detail of the story is correlated to form a unified impression of mystery and horror. The story was first published in 1839 in the Burton's Gentleman's Magazine. It was slightly revised in 1840 for the collection Tales of the Grotesque and Arabesque. In writing the story, Poe might have been influenced by the events of the Usher house located on Boston's Lewis Wharf. Here, a sailor and the young wife of the older owner were said to be entombed by her husband. When the Usher house was torn down in 1800, 2 bodies were found embraced in a cavity in the cellar. The epigraph of the story quotes lines from a French poem called Le Rufus, written by Pierre-Jean de Bérengère. It is translated as follows: His heart is a suspended lute. As soon as one touches it, it resounds. The story opens with the arrival of the anonymous narrator at the haunted-looking house of his boyhood companion, Roderick Usher. The narrator detects something uncanny and diabolical about the Usher mansion, an atmosphere peculiar to themselves and their immediate vicinity, an atmosphere which had no affinity with the air of heaven, but which had reeked up from the decayed trees and the grey wall and the silent tarn, a pestilent and mystic vapour, dull, sluggish, faintly discernible and leaden-hued. The narrator's analytical observations on the Usher mansion are also Poe's contemplations on the evocative elements which constitute the uncanny atmosphere of the tale. The narrator has come in response to a letter he received from his boyhood friend Roderick. Roderick has been suffering from some strange illness and has requested his friend's help. He observes that some evil has gripped the house. Roderick calls it a constitutional and family evil. He suffers from a cluster of ailments: anxiety, hypersensitivity to light and sound, loss of appetite, and so on. The narrator finds Usher slave to an anomalous species of terror. Roderick's twin sister, Madeline, is also said to be ill. She experiences death-like trances. Roderick attributes the diseases to a family history of weakness and poor survival. The physical problems are also an indication of Roderick's mental and moral state. The narrator admires his friend's paintings which adorn the house. He attempts in vain to establish a semblance of normalcy in the house. In other words, he tries to cheer up his melancholy friend. He reads with him and listens to his musical compositions. Roderick sings the poem entitled The Haunted Palace. The Haunted Palace was a poem written by Poe himself and was published separately several months before the publication of the tale. It is positioned appropriately in the middle of the story. It is meant to serve as a mission abim, in other words, a thematic miniature of the story which contains it. The story has other intertextual allusions as well. Usher's painting reminds the narrator of the 18th century Swiss-born British painter of the fantastic and grotesque Henry Fuseli. Roderick conveys to the narrator his belief that the house is sentient, that is, it has the ability to feel like human subjects. Later, he informs the narrator that Madeline has died and insists that she be temporarily entombed in a vault inside the house before her permanent burial. There is a popular reference here to body snatching. Roderick expresses his fear that his sister's body might be dug up for medical examination. The narrator helps Roderick with the entombment. He notes that Madeline has rosy cheeks. Over the next week, both Roderick and the narrator become increasingly uneasy and disturbed. They also hear several strange sounds. No explanation is given for this. The key scene of the tale starts with a raging storm. Roderick comes into the narrator's bedroom, which is situated directly above the vault in which Madeline was buried. He throws open the window to the storm. To his eyes, the tarn or the mountain lake surrounding the house seems to glow in the dark. The narrator endeavors to calm Roderick by reading a medieval romance called The Mad Tryst, written by Sir Launcelot Canning. It's about a knight named Ethelred. Ethelred takes refuge in a hermit's house in order to escape an approaching storm. He finds a palace of gold guarded by a dragon. Ethelred also finds a shining brass shield hanging on the wall. A legend has been written about it. The one who slays the dragon also wins a shield. Ethelred kills the dragon. When he approaches the shield, it falls onto the ground with a clatter. They hear, as the narrator reads the story, Roderick and he starts hearing noises similar to what is described in the romance. Roderick becomes hysterical, falls off, and starts muttering something. He reveals to the narrator that Madeline was alive while she was buried. Probably she has been trying to escape from the vault. This explains the noises they have been hearing for the past few days. Roderick has been enacting a self-fulfilling prophecy of doom. When the door is blown open, Madeline appears. She attacks her brother. Both fall on the floor as corpses. Roderick Usher has died of fear. As the narrator flees the house, he sees in a flash of lightning the house of Usher cracking along a break in the frame and sinking into the tarn. In The Fall of the House of Usher, Poe has been successful in creating an atmosphere of horror and hypnotic emotional tone hinged on the elements of fear, melancholy, doom, and guilt. The first scene establishes the atmosphere of the story and gives us a clue regarding the effect which the author is trying to achieve. During the whole of a dull, dark, and soundless day in the autumn of the year, when the clouds hung oppressively low in the heavens, I had been passing alone on horseback through a singularly dreary tract of country, and at length found myself, as the shades of the evening drew on, within view of the melancholy house of Usher. It is a unique passage which blends passion and horror. Words like dull, dark, soundless, alone, and oppressive suggest eeriness, gloom, melancholy, and horror. The diction is intended to evoke a nightmarish and vacant world. The tale, The Fall of the House of Usher, employs stock or formulaic Gothic elements. These include mysterious diseases, madness, live burials, corpses, and suggestions of incest and vampirism. But in Poe, these elements are manifestations of human psychology rather than indications of the supernatural. In his review of Hawthorne's Twice Told Tales, Poe explains his theory of the short story. Poe believed that a reader should be able to finish a short story in one sitting. Interruption interferes with the unity of effect. Poe considered the short story superior to a poem. While attainment of beauty is the objective of a poem, a writer of short stories may bring in a variety of moods, thoughts, and modes of expression into a tale. In other words, a tale is multidimensional. We know that the fall of the house of Usher is capable of generating meanings at multiple levels. It is suggestive, symbolic, and complex. It simultaneously deals with the themes such as identity, oppression, suffering, sentience, and death. The tale, The Fall of the House of Usher, is carefully structured. It's divided into three parts. The first part introduces us to the Usher mansion and its inhabitants. The second part develops the relationship between Usher and his sister. The third part begins after Madeline's burial. It builds up towards her reappearance and ends with the crashing of the house. The structure of the story enables Poe to achieve a single preconceived effect. Every impression, every incident in the story contributes to this effect. One also notices in the tale a series of paired characters, events, places, and objects. Note that Madeline and Usher are identical twins. The tale also has a poem called The Haunted Palace placed in its middle. It serves as a mise-en abîme, in other words, a thematic miniature of the story which contains it. Let us now discuss the major themes of the tale, The Fall of the House of Usher. The first theme is that of sentience. The horror which runs through the story is partly derived from sentience, an uncanny sense of life attributed to the Usher house, its surroundings, and the objects associated with it. The horror of the house is the horror of Usher's soul. The epigraph of the story introduces the theme of sentience. The symbol of the lute in the epigraph indicates both the animate and the inanimate. Like the lute, everything is infused with a mysterious life of its own, waiting for a touch to produce strange and strained notes. This lifelike pulsation found in inanimate things intensifies the horror in the reader's mind. It inspires horror even in the mind of the rational and matter-of-fact narrator. A chill passes through his heart and nerves when he sees the bleak walls, vacant eye-like windows, a few rank sedges, and white trunks of decayed trees. Of course, these descriptions point to the dilapidation of the house, but they also convey something sinister. There is a horrific correspondence between people and objects in the story. Roderick, Madeline, and the house seem to share a single soul. In fact, there is a close identity between Usher and the house. One enacts a slow but steady deterioration of the other. The crack in the structure is symbolic of familial decline. The crashing of the house also means the end of the family line. The title of the story is significant here. The relationship between the house and its owner is significant because it is an atmosphere story. The atmosphere enacts the peculiarity of gloom, the gradual deprivation, and the ultimate destruction of the protagonist. The concept of atmosphere comes from 19th century determinism. According to the theory of determinism, man is embedded in a milieu. The milieu envelops the individual, it represents his doom, it also weighs him down. Atmosphere is said to have a life and animating principle of its own. In Poe's tale, the protagonist himself accepts the destructive influence of the house and its setting. It is an influence exerted by the very physique of the grey walls, the turrets, and the dim tarn into which they all look down. The denouement of the tale comes in a tempestuous night. During the night before the catastrophe, the environs are illuminated by the unnatural light of a faintly luminous and distinctly visible gaseous exhalation which hung about and enshrouded the mansion. The atmosphere has a ponderous intensity about it. The clouds are unnaturally dense and the whirlwind changes direction violently with a lifelike velocity. These small objects become significant when Poe infuses them with the horrors of a tormented soul. The next major theme in the tale is life, death, and art. Roderick dramatizes the condition of death in life or death wish. As opposed to this, Madeline represents the will to live or life in death. Though her brother buries her in the vault, she comes back. At one level, the tale is also about the poet's place in a corrupt world. He must choose between life and death, between rationality and irrationality. Perhaps based on his own life experiences, Poe is suggesting that the poet, despite his hatred of the rational world, should not hate life. It should not lead to a desire for physical extinction. Usher represents an intermediate condition between rationality and irrationality. He has no contact with the world outside his mansion. He is devoid of the company of fellow humanity. He is not a social being at all. He is cadaverous. He lives in a dreamlike state. He represents some kind of anti-rational art. He is in a kind of visionary mood which Poe and even Plato believed suitable for a poet to possess. Thus, the tale is a symbolic treatment of aesthetic sensibility. Voluntarily withdrawn from the external world, the inhabitants of the Usher mansion have strange sensations. In other words, they live in the self-enclosed world of a strange art. A dominant theme in Poe's tale is that of identity. Remember that Roderick and Madeline are identical twins. They live in a vacuum as opposed to the gay occurrences of the outside world. The reason for his killing her is a mystery. He suffers from nervous agitation and buries her in a hysterical state. His incestuous love prompts him to possess her body within the house as long as possible. But later Madeline buries her brother under her falling body. They show incestuous and sterile love for each other with no possibility of consummation. If the brother and sister can be considered as representing male and female principles, they exchange their positions in the scene of Madeline falling over Roderick. It is possible for them to exchange their positions because they are identical twins. Poe's tale, The Fall of the House of Usher, can also be read as a moral allegory and a psychic drama. At the allegorical level, the tale enables Poe to explore man's moral sense. According to Poe, the individual has no responsibility for the presence or absence of any moral sense in him. The rationale behind one's choice of good or evil is beyond human comprehension. Some unknown force instigates the doer to evil deeds, but strangely, He is doomed to suffer the penalty for his deeds. Poe termed this inscrutable instinct to evil perversity. He believed that man was a disintegrated and disjointed being in a quasi-absurd cosmic order. Evil, pain and suffering are part and parcel of human life. A release comes from this condition of perversity only with death. The Fall of the House of Usher is also an intricate drama of psychic disintegration. The tale is a study of the disintegration of organic human whole. A human being has the body, the mind, and what may be called a spirit. Usher stands for the mind or the intellectual aspect. Madeline, his sister, represents the physical side. Usher is unhealthy. He has also taken an aversion to his physical side. Probably this explains his killing of Madeline, who represents the physical side. But Madeline returns. He is the mind and she is the body. Now both of them die together. When one collapses, the other also does the same. As for the spiritual moral aspect, the characters of the story, Roderick and Madeline, live in a condition of absolute moral anarchy. They live as if the moral norms established by the society do not exist at all. Let us conclude now. We began with an introduction to Edgar Allan Poe, the American short story writer and poet. We had a critical summary of his tale, The Fall of the House of Usher. Then we discussed the structure and tone of the tale. We discussed the themes of the tale, the theme of sentience, the themes of life, death and art, and the theme of identity and incest. We ended this program with a discussion of the tale as a psychic drama and as a moral allegory. Thank you.